Dr. Niall Blunt is a passionate arts educator with over a decade of experience in leading innovative and sustainable museum-based learning initiatives. Dr. Blunt currently serves as the Senior Director of Museum Learning at the Museum of Fine Arts. In his role, he oversees K-12 programming for students and teachers, gallery teaching, museum collection training, community programming, and studio arts courses. Throughout his career, he has also served as a classroom teacher, curator, museum educator, and professor of curatorial studies. In these roles, Dr. Blunt has directed the design, development, and implementation of all engagements with regional K-16 students and educators. He's led exhibition and collection-focused public programs, spearheaded many community-based initiatives, in addition to teaching courses in history, art history, and museum studies. He has given presentations, delivered lectures, and moderated panels across North America and Europe on myriad topics related to the future of arts museums and art education. Dr. Blunt earned his BA at American University in Washington, D.C., and holds an MA and PhD from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And after many months in the planning, I'm really delighted to welcome Dr. Blunt.
Thank you so much, or thanks everybody for turning up. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be the last in the series. That's at last and hopefully not least. And I'm also really excited about having the opportunity and being invited to speak with people who have devoted their careers to shaping young minds and teaching. I myself was a classroom teacher in Massachusetts at an independent school, but nonetheless, for 7 years, I was here in the Commonwealth doing that work. So again, really delighted to be here. I'm going to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint that I will pull up now and begin. So I will just opening slide. We'll jump into the agenda, just to give a sense of what we'll be talking about. So a little bit about the history of the MFA's engagement with students and teachers, then to talk about the present, so thinking about the Division of Learning and Community Engagement, which is, I'll say more about, but that's the division in which my Department of Museum Learning is situated, and then talking a bit about the work that my department does in engaging students, teachers, and multi-generational audiences across the spectrum. And then I want to offer 3 case studies of the kind of work that we do and thinking about specific examples and highlighting how these 3 case studies really demonstrate what we have achieved, what we hope to achieve, and what we're thinking about perhaps for the future. And then I'd like to pose a couple of questions. I think this is a great audience to ask some questions about what the future might look like, having so much rich knowledge and experience, and thinking about how this group might help shape the work that I do and that my team does into the future. And then finally, there'll be a Q&A. And I'm really excited about hearing from you for both of those sections. Thinking about a long history of engagement for the Museum of Fine Arts, and these are 2 photographs from the archives. I think are just great. They are both from the 1920s, and they show field trips. One is, I think, mostly boys, and the other is mostly girls. One outside the building, one inside. And I'm delighted to find these sort of historic vintage photos, because we do have over a century of field trips, studio art classes, and a really robust partnership with Boston Public Schools in particular. Of course, we welcome students from districts across New England, especially Massachusetts, but also Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Rhode Island, even sort of parts of Connecticut. But we have had a long and very robust relationship with Boston Public Schools, and we are continuing that relationship and indeed building on it with, I'm not sure if you've heard of the new initiative from the school district in the city to offer Boston Public Schools open access Sundays, where students K through 12 and I think it's 3 family members on the first 2 Sundays of every month can go to a number of cultural organizations in the city for free. So that's the Museum of Fine Arts, the Institute of Contemporary Art, the zoo, the aquarium, and the Children's Museum and the Science Museum. So we are using that moment of this pilot program to offer free access to really reinvigorate what we're doing and how we do it. And later you'll see all the programs that I'll mention, we do offer for free to BPS schools. We are unfortunately unable to do that for all school children, which would be my dream. But for now, we are starting, incrementally with Boston Public Schools. So again, a long history of innovation and engagement, and really thinking about the arts and bringing the arts to classrooms to both supplement, support, and enhance the teaching and learning that's happening in classrooms across the city and the state. So, and also, I think it's helpful just to think about the way education and engagement is structured here at the MFA. So there, as of 2019, there's now a division of learning and community engagement that brought together what's called the education department, and then other departments that were very disparate and separate into one division that has 5 departments, and sets us up to all achieve the same goal, which is to develop audiences, to make the arts accessible in every definition of that word, and to really think about intentionally about the way in which we welcome people to the museum, or invite them to the museum, how we welcome them, and what kind of experience we give them. So just briefly, I will note that the 5 departments are museum learning, which is the one that I run, academic engagement and research, which really focuses on university and college students, faculty, and then researchers and other scholars in many different fields that are related to our collection. There's public programs, which is sort of the parties and large scale events, and also speaker series and lectures and that sort of thing. There's interpretation, which is the term we use in the museum world to help explain how we in the museum help visitors understand the artwork, right? So people who work in interpretation write the wall text and the labels that hardly anyone reads, but nonetheless they write them, and work pretty closely with curators and with designers and others to present that information in an accessible way to the public. And then finally, we have community engagement, which is thinking about specific groups of people, like our teen programs department section is in community engagement, our access programs, right? So thinking about people with disabilities and people who experience the museum in different ways because of various kinds of ability levels. So and also audience engagement and a few other sections. But those are the 5 departments that make up the division of learning and community engagement, and really shape the way in which the museum itself approaches bringing people in and giving them an educational experience of some kind. And I think that, in my opinion, museums certainly are arts organizations, cultural organizations, but they're also educational organizations. I think that so, and not just for field trips and other kinds of class-based visits, but thinking about, one of the main reasons people visit museums is indeed to learn or to explore or to discover something new, something they've known and forgotten, something that or revisit something you're familiar with. But I think that many people think of it that way. And so the work that we do, not just in museum learning, but across these departments, to help people have those experiences and really feel good about what they're learning and exploring is great, and we are really energized around that. I'll also say, I think that in the last 6 years or so, a lot of museum education departments have renamed themselves to learning. And my thinking around that is because I think education there's a more traditional way of thinking about what museum education is. Thinking about in the sort of old days when, during a field trip, the docent or the museum educator would more or less just tell the students about the art, and just sort of, give a bit of sort of a lecture around what's going on, who the artist was, what are the themes, maybe ask a couple of sort of questions at the end, but more or less just talking. at people, sort of the way I'm doing now. But we really are thinking about transitioning to thinking about learning because it's more active. It demonstrates the relationship between, again, the either the volunteer tour guide as we have here, or the or a museum educator, which we also have the majority of our tours offered by volunteers, thinking about the way in which they engage audiences, whether they are school-based or if they are tours that are offered every single day at certain times that people just drop in and take them, how they are engaging them from start to finish, how they're giving them a certain kind of experience. And I think that learning perhaps suggests that there's something a little bit different going on, is maybe a little more expansive and hopefully more forward thinking, sort of suggesting that, and then that's demonstrated in those experiences. So it does sound a little funny to say I'm the senior director of museum learning as opposed to the senior director of education, but I think again it's really for those reasons I just noted. Um, and I will say too, I want to give this background because I do think that there should be a grounding in what we are, who we are, and how we're shaped, and what we're doing, and what resources we sort of have to do the work before talking about the work. I think that makes the actual sort of the work of the people on my team a little more clear, and you can see the impact perhaps better if you know how things are set up. So with that being said, I'll also just talk briefly about the Department of Museum Learning in a couple of slides. So there are 4 sections in learning. So community, and I'll just briefly explain what they are, and you'll have a more in-depth moment in a little bit about 3 case studies. But so I start with community arts. That is an area where we are engaging really robustly with community partners, and we are thinking about how we engage the community writ large, right? I think anybody who lives in New England, we can define as a community, down to the people who are living really, very close to the museum, or people who are frequent visitors. We can slice and dice community in a number of ways, but we are thinking about specific community partners within the city of Boston, but also thinking very broadly about multi-generational audiences. So families, friend groups, people who are visiting that are of different, and exactly what it says, different generations, or and mixed, intergenerational, so they're mixed ages and that kind of thing, and different backgrounds. How do we engage them in the museum? How do we work towards having a little something for everybody? We're not always going to please everybody or engage everyone equally, but if we're trying to, sort of build a number of resources that do look into or look out for opportunities for people to engage in new and interesting ways. The community arts team within learning really is thinking about that a lot, and especially around art making activities that happen both inside the museum regularly and also on our lawns and other places around town. Then gallery teaching, which is that's the area that trains our docents as to how to best engage K through 12 teachers and students, and then also visitors who would already be in the museum, and then at 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. every day could take a tour, an hour-long tour with 5 or 6 artworks, and see sort of what we used to call like a highlights tour, but it's really just getting them into different galleries and looking at different works of art that I think they're offered by a number of guides, so there's no tour that's exactly the same. And I'm realizing now that I made an assumption, thinking that everyone on the call would know what the MFA is and that kind of thing, know a lot about it. And I am remiss in that because, of course, maybe you don't, if they haven't visited before, don't think about the MFA often, not nearly as much as I do, at least. So I will say just some interesting facts about the MFA before I go on, especially thinking about the tours. So the Museum of Fine Arts, right, which is sort of at the cross section of Longwood and Fenway and Roxbury on Huntington Avenue, was so I think we were founded in 1860, I believe, and in a different location, but now occupy this building at 465 Huntington. It is the 5th largest museum in the United States, and it's the 20th largest in the world in terms of square footage. There's almost 1 million square feet, which I think is really interesting sort of factoid. And there are 500,000 objects in the permanent collection. Not, of course, they're not all on view, certainly. I mean, there's a small percentage of that's on view at any given time, but yeah, 500,000 objects. And by objects, I mean paintings, sculptures, photographs, prints, drawings, furniture, all those sorts of things. So a large, robust museum and we see about 1 million visitors a year. So just to give some grounding on what the MFA is, and I should have done that earlier, and I apologize. So the next we have school programs, which is a very, I think people might be familiar with that. It's the way in which we engage K through 12 teachers and students through school partnerships, through working with our guided teaching team to offer field trips, through distance learning programs, through teacher professional development sessions and workshops. Sometimes they're, sort of an hour, sometimes they're all day workshop. We also have various kinds of resources for teachers to use in the classroom and in the museum. So lots going on there, school programs, and that's a very, even if the museum is very, very small, which this museum is not. Every museum that engages in education has some version of a school programs department, maybe called different things, but certainly they are thinking about teachers and students in that way, as we certainly are. And then finally, there's the studio art classes, which are art classes in a number of different media: oils, watercolor, sort of drawing, printmaking, 3D art such as clay sculptures and that kind of thing. So a very robust, very active program that sees many students in each of the 3 terms throughout the year, which is exciting, gets people and offers another way into the museum beyond coming with friends or family and having or taking a tour or having a small conversation, really doing making and creating and that kind of thing. So those are the 4 sections that make up the learning department. And this is the last slide about the department itself, but it gives a sense of who the audiences are, right? So the red boxes are the names of the sections of the learning, and then the white boxes with black text are all of the various audiences that we are thinking about actively in those sections. So the gallery teaching, school programs, community art sections are each run by a director who reports to me, and then the studio art classes is run by a senior manager who reports to me. And these amazing people who are very talented are as they are developing programs, as they are thinking really broadly about how to do things in innovative ways and how to continue to be relevant and to grow. These are the audiences they have in mind. So in gallery teaching, we're thinking about K-12 students, their teachers, university students, university faculty. Our museum volunteers are a type of audience. I mean, they're partners with us to present the tours, but they also are, sort of learning from the staff and thinking about how they engage in really interesting ways. And then there's also museum staff, and I have the museum staff listed because this is gallery teaching and collections training. And so what that means is that the people that run the gallery teaching also are building online and synchronous and asynchronous models for having volunteer staff, anybody who's sort of internal, to learn about objects in the collection, works of art in the collection, exhibitions, whole galleries, gallery installations, and that sort of thing. So the people on that team are also very much thinking about ourselves as a type of audience, which I think is useful because that's sort of probably the toughest audience, or the sort of the toughest critics. And school programs it's very similar set of audiences, right? Students and teachers in K through 12. We're also thinking about building leaders, right? Principals, vice principals, district administrators, and I see that word got broken up a little funny, but there it is. And then also school boards and school systems. And so we are constantly thinking about how we can impact both individual students, classrooms, individual teachers, groups of teachers that are, sort of based in a school or based across a curriculum, or or maybe a type of identity or something like that. And we're also thinking about individual schools, school systems, and the people that run those schools and school systems as advocates and people who make the resources available for the kinds of activities and programs that we offer and hope to continue offering. And then our community arts program, we really focus specifically on fourth to ninth grade students for a number of different reasons, which I'll go into, because the community arts program is one of the 3 case studies that I mentioned earlier. We in those students' families, then our community partners, which there are 12 official community partners with many other, certainly many other community organizations that have robust relationships with the community arts section, with learning, with the museum. And then our museum audiences through those multi-generational programs that I mentioned, such as, creating interesting but accessible art projects in the museum, or having various kinds of engagements that would hopefully be of interest to anybody. I often say to my team, thinking about multi-generational programming, it's not just for families, which I think that in museums, like any other industry, we use a lot of coded language, right? We say one thing to really mean something different. And so typically in museums, when you say families, you really mean kids, right? And that's great that you should definitely get kids involved in the arts as early as possible. They'll become hopefully lifelong art lovers, or at least appreciators of art. But I think it's important that we engage everybody. So one of the things I say to my team is that, imagine there was a 35-year-old woman who doesn't have children, who comes to the museum with her mother, right? And who's maybe in her 60s. They should be able to have a multi-generational experience that is enjoyable for them, and they can join a program that's already happening, or come for a program that is not necessarily directed at children, because they would think, well, maybe this isn't for us because it's really for families, or really just for kids, and it seems like it's something that's very juvenile or that kind of thing. So we really want to be able to, as much as we want to offer something for families and for multi-generational audiences, meaning, thinking about family groups, we should also be able to offer things for that 35-year-old woman and her mother, or a group of friends who are coming together, or people from, friends from work who are many different ages and identities, who can come and again have some kind of experience that would, beyond just sort of looking at the art and talking about it, but really helps them think about the museum in a more active way, perhaps, and also offers them a great opportunity to look at, think about, enjoy the artworks and the other resources here at the museum. And then finally, the audiences for studio art classes, adults, teenagers, and children, very simple. Within that, many different kinds of people who are in those 2 categories, of course, but and we refer to each of these groups as students. Certainly there are there are adults who are very, very talented oil painters who have been taking classes for 25 years, right? To are still students because they're learning from an instructor and that kind of thing. And so and we have a really robust summer camp program for children and teenagers during the summer, and certainly offer courses that are meant to meet the expectations and needs of audiences. So there's a great sort of drawing course that's really focused on graphic novels or comic books for children. I'm sorry, for teenagers, excuse me. And there's lots of accessible ways of children thinking about the arts, and both from kids who are just starting out and don't think of themselves as artists, but like to draw or paint, and then other children who are taking it really seriously and do think of themselves as artists and want to grow those skills. So that's across the board. The last thing I'll say about this slide is that the one of the major things of all the audiences we engage is people who are students of some kind. And I think now that we're moving away from education, we also in some ways are moving away from calling people students. So we're thinking more about learners. I don't mean never using the word students, maybe in terms of being in the museum and what you're experiencing, thinking about learners, because again, it's a bit broader, even though it sounds a little awkward, it's a bit broader because I think in our mind, we think students, we only think maybe K through 12 or perhaps college, but really thinking about how teachers are also learners. Certainly the best teachers are lifelong learners, like we always say, right? Families that are engaging are also learning something. And certainly the other categories that I've listed here, categories of people I've listed here are learning something and also contributing to things. I mean, learners are also doers and growers and all the things that you know, but so that the common theme is that students in some way, young people in some ways, sort of repeated across these four sections. And I think that's really important because that is at the end of the day our main audience for the museum learning department. Whereas, for instance, public programs that are again parties and lectures and celebrity lecture series and courses and that kind of thing would certainly think of adults as being their primary audience. However, they do also engage multi-generational um, people as well, visitors as well. So just to give a sense of who our audiences are and how we think about them. So that's some grounding in what the Division of Learning and Community Engagement is, a sense of what the Department of Museum Learning does more broadly. And now I'd like to really hone in on these three case studies that I think provide a cross section of the kind of work that we do, and also offer specific examples in three ways of how we approach the work. So in the three case studies, we'll focus on field trips, the Community Arts Initiative, and our distance learning programs. And I chose these not entirely arbitrarily, but certainly there are many other programs that I could have chosen for the case studies, but these three, I think, I wanted to do one that was pretty familiar. I think field trips is a pretty familiar concept. Certainly, I'm sure that all of you have taken students on field trips many times during your careers as teachers, right? But then, but I think the other two, the Community Arts Initiative, which is a very specific program, which I'm very proud of and happy to talk about, but then also distance learning, which is which might be a phrase that's a little bit tricky. I sometimes have trouble with it, knowing thinking about exactly what it is, but being able to explain how we engage teachers and students virtually is really exciting as well, which is what our distance learning programs are. So those are the three case studies. We're going to dive right into field trips. Field trips, which are now sometimes called school visits, because I think museums are really interested in sort of always finding sort of new language that might help to explain things or to be broader, and sometimes it can sound a little bit awkward. So even though school visits is what we typically call them, and what you'll see in a lot of museums, it's a field trip, right? That's the easiest way to sort of think about it. So we offer guided and self-guided field trips. Guided meaning you come and you have a volunteer tour guide who's trained in the collection and experienced in giving tours to K-12 students. And you also have self-guided, meaning that the teacher arranges to come, but then brings their class or their classes or the grade and walks around the museum themselves without a museum volunteer or staff person to explore the galleries in a particular way. It's usually when something is like it's self-guided tours, when there's something very specific, like let's say it's a French class, so like a ninth grade French class, and they want to see Impressionist art only. So they will come on their own and go to the Impressionist galleries and maybe the class is in French or something. And so that's a very specific thing that would be self-guided. Even though we offered field trips for a very long time, over a century, as I showed with those photographs in the 1920s, the COVID-19 pandemic, as it did in most areas of people's lives, it really impacted museum education generally and the MFA. And I'm not going to go into all the ways it did. I think we all know the ways in which COVID really changed our lives in a sort of course of history in lots of ways. But one thing it did with field trips was that it gave us a 3-year hiatus from welcoming school groups to the museum. When the museum was closed, when schools were closed, as our volunteers, who many of whom are of an age that is more vulnerable to the COVID-19 than maybe some others. So we had to pause for 3 years and really had the opportunity to think about what we were offering, how we rebuild. And it really was a rebuilding of the program. And I'm saying we, although I didn't say earlier that I've only been at the MFA for a year and a month. I arrived in spring of 2023 from Rochester, New York, where I was the head of education at a small academic art museum and also professor curatorial practice. But we, meaning my team, took 3-year hiatus and then brought tours back online in January of last year. And tours that are offered now, there are two sort of themes. One is community identity, which is quite broad and focuses on having the students understand how we can learn about other communities, our own communities, and our and other identities and our own identities, and the great diversity of community identities through the arts. So it's a broad enough that it helps teachers and students explore many different parts of the collection, but it also offers a theme that gives some cohesion to the field trips, because as I said, we are rebuilding. And then recently, just in early March, we premiered our Arts of Ancient Egypt tour, which of course is extremely popular. I think many people are familiar with in some way and really love Egyptian art, and sculpture and mummies and that kind of thing. So we've had that come back, and that was sold out within just a few weeks, which is really exciting for us. Our most frequent visitors, even though we certainly see pre-K through, through graduate school classes, but in K through 12, K through seniors, our most frequent visitors are fourth graders and sixth graders, and I think that's directly tied to curriculum, right, to state standards. Certainly, the ancient world is a part of the sixth grade curriculum, so our really fantastic Greek and Roman and Etruscan galleries are visited, but as well, but certainly the Arts of Ancient is a very, very popular and enticing field trip, and we're happy to have brought it back online. And just to give you a sense of how many people were engaging. So in this school year to date, we have had 56 schools on 76 tours and just shy of 4,000 visitors, which is a fraction of what we used to do. But I think for rebuilding and having this being the first full school year that we're offering tours, it's not too shabby, and we hope to do more. And as I said before, we offer field trips for no cost to Boston Public Schools. And I should mention that we do have certain funds that allow for reimbursements for buses if the school is Title I or has a high percentage or a certain percentage of free reduced lunches. And that's anybody who comes, not just BPS. But but it is a challenge because we do charge other schools and we do other school systems, and sometimes it is tricky to find the funding to bring students and to find the funding for transportation if it can't be reimbursed and that kind of thing. So we do want to increase those numbers, and part of my role in leading the way in which the museum shapes its efforts at engaging teachers and students amongst other audiences is to advocate for resources, right? So thinking consistently, constantly, working with our friends in advancement development to think about how do we make more funds available so people can, we can offer more things for free, people can come and really have the field trips, enhance and augment and support their curriculum, right? I think that there are lots of great ways that happens. There's lots of ways that we can think about harnessing and leveraging technology in ways we don't do right now, but we could, which would be really great. And we do plan to continue building these tours and adding them to the roster, the lineup of tours, so that we can reach more interests. We're also engaged right now in building self-guided materials so that when teachers bring their students for self-guided experience, it's not totally on their own. Right? Some people like to do that. Certainly our college university faculty who come absolutely want to be on their own because they, want to really think about in depth about a particular thing that they probably have some really, some esoteric thing they have a lot of experience with and a lot of expertise on. But then I think other educators across the board would love a little bit of guidance. Well, this place is huge, it's almost 1 million square feet. Where do I start? What should I do? So I'm interested in how do we sort of do that? How do we engage that way? So a lot of conversations with teachers, a lot of follow-up with surveys, a lot of the conversations both after and before the tour. And before is really important because there are people on my team will, once the teacher sort of uses the online web form to say when they want to come, what they want to see, there's usually a phone call that happens where we get a little bit more information about what they're actually doing, and if it is going to be directly based on a lesson plan or some part of the curriculum, or if it's going to be sometimes a little bit more fun. And I do think it's great when after testing, teachers bring their students for the to the museum for like a sort of a fun reward field trip, right? As opposed to going to the aquarium or the zoo, which I think, which you can't argue are not more popular for a lot of different reasons, but there are teachers and our families that come to the museum for those kinds of reward sort of moments, which we do like. But even then, there should be something that is, again, they're thinking about a learning in an engaging way. So that's a little bit about how field trips help to engage students, teachers. And again, I think nothing at the moment that's sort of revolutionary or things that would sort of assume would be available on field trips, but we are, that is the sort of the bread and butter of what we do, and all the programming that we do, especially in school programs. I ask that all of that sort of in some way, if possible, if they're close enough, lead to an in-person visit, right? So whether it's distance learning or teacher PD or our school partnership program, they're all amazing, they're great, but they're even greater when they can eventually get the people in the building, right? And creating those opportunities, those resources. Um, so the next case study is the Community Arts Initiative. So the Community Arts Initiative is in its 19th year, which is really exciting. And it is our sort of really blue chip gold standard program for engaging community partners and the people who are make up those partners, like the people who are those partners serve and engage. So the Community Arts Initiative works with 12 community partners, most of which are boys and girls clubs, although there are a couple of other clubs as well. And they go to the schools. So we have community arts liaisons who go into these community partner sites. The number of boys and girls clubs across neighborhoods in Boston, and a couple of other community partners, just Sociedad Latina, for instance. And we have we have 12 liaisons, each one-to-one for the partners who go do art projects and talk about and really create a bridge between the museum and those partners and their families. So they go and they talk a lot about the museum. They do art projects. They bring the young people to the museum frequently, about once a month or so, and are really building this sense of community and a sense of understanding and belonging and welcome in the museum, doing the work of something that I often think about and I've talked about a number of times across in this space, across other museums I worked at, and also in different kinds of opportunities for speaking engagements, is really thinking about how do we make the art museum, whatever museum it is, feel like it's a part of someone's community, just like their school, their place of worship, their rec center, their post office. I mean, no matter where the museum is in the city, how do we make sure that anybody, and this is a pie in the sky, sort of like really hopeful idea, but it gives us something to strive for, right? How do we make sure that any of those people feel like the museum is a part of their community, and what is the obligation, the onus of the museum to do that, right? Because I think that it is on us to do that, and we're not going to achieve it if we don't sort of make really bold and clear invitations. And then when people do come, and we break down the barriers for actually arriving, when they do arrive, they have a really good experience and they feel a sense of co-creation and co-ownership. And it's not just sort of, here you are in this space that feels very grand and intimidating, and we're going to tell you something, and you're going to benefit from it in some very in a way that you have not thought about, or you don't really want, but making sure we understand what we are offering and how people are involved in shaping what that is, and letting us know what they want, and not having us guess, because there's no better way to alienate people than to presume we know what they want and then give it to them without asking. So this Community Arts Initiative does that in really robust ways over the last 19 years, and we go into the community partners sites and that kind of thing. Really excitingly, though, the big part of this is during this whole time, each partner, community partner, is working with a local artist with a national reputation. So somebody based in Boston who may not be from Boston, but certainly during the 9 months of the school year is located in Boston. And they work with these students in every club or every community partner site to help them do the art making, help them think about works of art, and to help them um, think about themselves as creators, feeling a sense of pride in the work they're doing, even if they don't think of themselves as artists, or they say I'm really bad at drawing or painting, really building up their empowerment and thinking about themselves. But as they're doing that, they are having the students create works of art that are directly related to an exhibition, to a theme that they build over 9 months. And eventually what happens is, as it is right now, it's just happened just a couple of weeks ago, there's an exhibition that's in the contemporary wing of the museum that's on the first floor, and it's smack dab in the middle, it's right in your face. It's really extraordinary, where the artwork that's co-created by the students, the young people, and the artist is front and center. And then a curator, there's about 46 curators here. So one of our many curators works closely with the artist to complement the artworks made by the artists and the students with other objects in the museum's collection. This year, it's a really beautiful exhibition called Our Family Portrait, thinking about what family means, what are the different kinds of families, how we express our relationships or our relationships to our people in our families, and those kinds of things. So each of the students is prompted to be thinking of thinking of those things. They made this really amazing artwork, and then it was complemented by lots of portraits from the collection, because of course the name of the exhibition is Our Family Portrait. So really thinking about figural art and people in the art. We have 19 local artists, as I said, and over the last 19 years, we've had more than 10,000 participants, which has been really great. And the exhibition is up for 4 months. So I will say more about this towards the end, but I certainly invite you to please do come to the museum. And if you do come, in the Lindy family wing for contemporary art, which is quite near the coffee shop, to see the exhibition before it closes in September, because it really is extraordinary. And it absolutely demonstrates the power of what empowered young people can do. And also it helps to sort of demonstrate how the museum is attempting to really bring in the community and wrap them, help them feel like they're doing something that is really significant, and certainly have the artwork of a fourth grader on the wall of the museum, and not in a place where sort of no one ever sees it, or it's meant to be sort of a symbolic sort of thing, truly in a place where there are thousands of visitors that walk by every week. So that's really exciting. And I wanted to being a person in the art world, so the image, even the moving image, is worth 1,000 words. So I wanted to show a short video that there's no dialogue. There's music, but there's a dialogue that demonstrates what this year's community arts initiative looked like, and how it sort of played out with our really, really wonderful artist Timmy Lee, who was featured in the Boston Globe just about this initiative just 2 weeks ago, which is exciting. Oh no. I'm so sorry. I don't know why I did that.
No me saques del barrio,
No me saque, no me saque.
donde estamos viviendo.
Viviendo, viviendo.
No me saques del barrio, no me saques de donde estamos creciendo.
Born and raised in Mission Hill, it's still where I'm at. Thinking about the days that we'd all relax. Shooting hoops while neighborhood under attack. Got tired of it all, so we taking it back. Make a plan, take a stand, that's what we do. Best believe we gon' let the truth shine through.
No me saques del barrio,
No me saque, no me saque.
donde estamos viviendo.
Viviendo, viviendo.
No me saques del barrio, donde estamos creciendo. Ábreme la puerta que he venido a refugiarme por todo lo que me ha pasado. Por eso es que yo tengo que guardarme con solo las ganas de seguir rimando. El panaco me sigue llamando, ya no puedo ir a la bodega caminando. Por eso es que mi destino estoy afrontando, orando, celebrando, dando las gracias por todo lo que me ha dado, por toda la familia que ha estado a mi lado, lo que me ha ayudado. Pues vamos, sígueme ahora que no nos devolvemos, sígueme ahora que no retrocedemos, sígueme ahora que para adelante que vamos, que vamos, que vamos. No me saques del barrio,
No me saque, no me saque.
donde estamos viviendo.
Viviendo, viviendo.
No me saques del barrio, donde estamos creciendo.
So that video gets me every time because it's really an extraordinary demonstration of the whole year that the school year the students spent working with the artist Timmy Lee to create cyanotypes, which is a really interesting method of image transfer developed in the 19th century that this artist Timmy has really used in amazing ways in his practice that helped the students to really sort of dig in and become really experts in creating art that are in cyanotypes. So again, to see the outcome of that amazing work, please do come to the museum. for the exhibition. So the last case study is distance learning, which is the way in which we present virtual offerings on the artwork for really people across the country, certainly, but also schools in Massachusetts and that are close enough to the museum to come eventually if they sort of can't right away. They sometimes sign up for distance learning courses or distance learning lessons and have us zoom quite literally into their classrooms. And you see this image that showing is the museum educator who manages the iPad that is taken through the gallery, and on the iPad you see an image of the head of the assistant director for distance learning and school partnerships, who is going to be talking to a class, an individual class, about artworks in the collection, and they will be the artworks in this space where she is now, which is one of our floors in the Arts of the America galleries, American Wing. So, a live synchronous lesson around a particular theme that's been developed with the teacher. And so in our distance learning program, we've offered this year 13 webinars through Streamable Learning, which is a online streaming education platform that schools can sort of get a subscription to and then see those webinars which are recorded. And then we've offered 29 customized experiences, meaning that teachers written said, I would love for you to work with the 6th grade about the arts of Egypt, but we can't come because we're in Worcester or Springfield or Northampton or something. And so we've done that. And then we've in this school year, over 5,000 students from mostly, of course, from the webinars, but also from customized experiences have been engaged with this. And this is really, in some ways, the future, right? Leveraging technology in really interesting ways. It also, however, I think presents a challenge in some ways for museums and for teachers and students, because even though it's great that people who are not close were able to see the images in the galleries and that kind of thing, it does we do worry, will it then replace a visit to the museum, right? So if it's easier and cheaper, you don't have to organize everybody going on leaving the school and permission slips and buses and all that sort of thing, is it then going to replace it? And of course, there's nothing like seeing something in situ and in real time, and with your own eyes, not mitigated through a screen. But we have seen a lot of popularity around it because it does offer sort of easy alternative, and navigating the idea that we want to certainly offer people the opportunity to have these virtual experiences, but we wouldn't want them to replace it is a really tricky thing to do without sending mixed messages, right? So that's somewhere where we are still working on, and not just the MFA, certainly other museums do this very well. And the art museums, other kinds of museums do distance learning really well. And certainly after the pandemic, there are increasing numbers of museums who offer this option, because during the pandemic, they had to pivot towards this in order to keep engaging students and also keep the museum on the mind of teachers and administrators who are finding informal spaces of learning to enhance the curriculum. So there's much more to say about distance learning, but I'm mindful of time. So those 3 case studies, I think, give a cross section of the ways in which we are really working to engage in different ways, through different multimodal ways, and in hopefully exciting ways. Students, teachers, being and also young people and their families being sort of engaged with and introduced to the arts. So with that, I have a bit of a discussion thinking about the future of museum engagement. And I have 3 questions that I think I and my colleagues in the museum field are always thinking about, right? So the questions are sort of, what must museums do to remain relevant to classroom teachers into the future? Because we are, of course, competing with many other old and new resources and sources of sort of informal education and learning, that kind of thing. And then wondering if you have any ideas for new programs the MFA should try. And then thinking about, finally, what are the most significant barriers to developing new audiences, offering engaging experiences, and capturing the imagination of young people, right? Which is a kind of a huge, they're all big questions, but that one is particularly big. So I think that what might be best, given the time, is to, I would ask that you really think about these, and I will put them in the chat after I stop sharing, so that part of the, maybe perhaps part of the Q&A will be your own questions, perhaps if you have about the work that myself and my team are doing, but also offering some insights into these three questions. So I think that probably is the best way to proceed, because I really would love to hear from you. And I realize I have been talking at you for an hour. So with that, I will say thank you.